Hi, I'm Sam, and this is my sister Lisa.
Hi.
Welcome to Exhumed.
Tonight's episode.
Well, it's Titanic.
For those of you watching, I am aware that I look like a troll. It's been a day, so mind your business. Sam's trying to cheer me up.
I actually put a bra on, I did my hair, and I am wearing my partner's shirt for this episode, Titanic. We got it at the exhibit in Vegas.
Cool.
She got it. She's letting me borrow it. You wear it.
I told Sam I was not in the mood to record tonight. She goes, I put a bra on and I did my hair. I'm like, okay.
I put a bra on my day off.
Oh. Wow.
We know the struggle.
Yes. All right. Titanic.
Well, so for anyone who doesn't know about the Titanic, I don't know where you've been all your life, but seriously, like, you need to stop listening to this and go watch the damn movie. Mind you that the only thing in that movie that's historically really inaccurate is Jack and Rose. James Cameron did an amazing job with everything else. All these little extra people in the background that you don't think are really a part of it, they actually are more realistic and real people than Jack and Rose. Like, you remember towards the end of the movie where the Irish woman is putting her kids to sleep as the Titanic is sleeping?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that actually happened. They have names.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm not doing a recap of the movie. I'm not doing a recap of pretty much what everyone else does and talks about the basic shit for the Titanic. That if you want to hear it, I'm sure you can click on any other podcast that talks about Titanic, and they're all, for the most part, going to say the same thing. I'm not doing that. This is a little bit darker, but I will go through the basic history of it. So what do you remember about it?
About what? About the movie?
No, just about Titanic in general.
I never really knew much about Titanic until I watched the movie. And a lot of that is, they focused on a fictional couple. So I don't know very much about it at all, really. Not what you're going to tell me.
No. Well, it's actually called the RMS Titanic. RMS stands for Royal Mail Ship. So its main purpose was to actually carry mail from country to country as also a passenger ship.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. That's what RMS stands for. And royal meaning that it's part of the UK, so whoever is queen or king at the time. I mean, it's royal. It was also a very luxurious passenger ship. It was specifically designed to carry mail. It wouldn't have been called RMS if it wasn't designed for that purpose. It took 2 years to build. It was completed March 31st, 1912. It cost $1.5 million to build, which it's equivalent today to 47 million. It was the largest moving human man-made object in its time. It was actually a couple of yards short of 3 football fields in length. If you compare it to luxurious cruise ships today, it's very small. It was built in Belfast, but when it reached Southampton, over 100,000 people actually came to see the launch, because it was the largest thing that anyone has ever seen that moved at that time. And in New York, well over 100,000 people showed up for when they thought the Titanic was going to arrive. It was actually the Carpathia with the passengers. They estimated well over 100,000 people to see its arrival. It had a number of innovative features, including the remotely sealable compartments at the bottom of the ship. So if one compartment flooded, they were able to remotely seal it off and it would not flood in other compartments of the ship. Mm-hmm. But when 4 to 6 compartments flood, it's still going to sink the ship, which is what happened. Mm-hmm. It was not a quick ship. It only went 24 to 26 knots, which is actually 26 to 28 miles per hour, I think. So it was nowhere near as fast as other ships, but that was also part of the White Star Line's thing. Like, we are not as quick as other ships, but we make up for it in luxury. Mm-hmm. They wanted very wealthy people to aboard the ship. But the funny thing is, so it was completed on March 31st. Its maiden voyage was on April 10th. So that's 11 days later. 10 to 11 days later
Mhm.
from when it was actually completed. It wasn't even yet completed when it launched. They still hadn't completed some of the rooms.
What wasn't done?
Mostly some of the third-class passenger rooms. Like, they didn't finish putting walls up. I mean, it's third-class passengers. It was steerage. They didn't really give a shit. And at that time, a third-class passenger on that ship would have been equivalent to a second-class passenger on any other ship. It was actually that great. So no one really gave a shit. The third-class passengers actually only had 2 bathrooms. I don't
share.
Yeah, I think it was about 300 to 400 people. I actually don't remember the number.
Wow.
But also the weird thing is that a week before it launched, it wasn't even at full capacity. It wasn't even at half. They had everything booked for essentially third-class passengers, half a second-class passengers, but they hardly had any first-class passengers. Because while people did believe that it was the unsinkable ship, they just didn't see it as any different than the other sister ships or anything that they've been on before. They actually had to bring on a captain, the Captain Edward Smith, over from one of their sister ships because he was nicknamed the Millionaire's Captain. He was a captain for 40 some years. I mean, hell, at that time, there was very few cars. Most of the people were still traveling by horse. Traveling by sea was the number one thing to do. So they brought him on, and that's when all the high-class people came to Titanic. They changed their plans. Like, oh, well, I guess I'll go back to America on this ship instead of this ship because it's unsinkable and it's the largest moving ship, and it's got Captain Edward Smith on it.
Oh.
But what's a little sad about that is it was supposed to be his very last travel, I guess.
Voyage?
Yeah, he used the Titanic's maiden voyage to be his last voyage. So it was going to leave Southampton, go to New York, and then come back. And then he was going to retire, spend time with his family. But for those who've watched the movie, it still kind of was. I mean,
yeah, that's what I was thinking too. I didn't want to say it.
No, it's not a very good thing to say.
Well, that's our dark humor. Our brains just went there.
Sorry.
Sorry. Like, yeah. Sorry.
Well, the conditions on that night were incredibly unfavorable. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that were kind of already there to put things into perspective on how bad that night actually was. In uncontrollable situations. It was one of the coldest nights recorded in 50 years in the month of April. It was foggy, which was also a sign of ice in the area, but it also wasn't a time in the season where icebergs were actually around. The water was also incredibly calm. It's been stated you couldn't tell the difference between the water and the sky. The stars weren't even helpful on the moonless night. The water being that calm was very dangerous because no one could see ripples in the water clashing against objects, which the waves would do.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
So one, it's cold as shit. There is fog coming out from the ocean. One, that you can tell that icebergs are around. And just imagine being out there where there's no moon to light up the sky, and you're looking out and you cannot tell the difference between with the horizon and the water and the sky.
Yeah.
There was also accounts where they said that in order for us to even know that there was a ship nearby, the silhouette of the ship is what you knew. Where the ship broke up the stars is where you knew that there was a ship there.
Wow.
Yeah, creepy, right?
Yeah. I'm already scared of the ocean, and this kind of stuff makes me not want to go on a cruise or anything because, yeah, if you get a night like that, that's dangerous. I'd be freaking out.
Well, you remember in the part of the movie where the 2 guys are up there right before they hit the iceberg in what they call a crow's nest? They're actually looking out for icebergs. They had no binoculars.
They didn't?
No. There were binoculars to use, but they were locked away.
Why?
Apparently, the key was with the former second officer, David Blair, who was transferred to another ship prior to Titanic's departure. So they could get to the binoculars. They had no key to open it up.
Wow.
They said the lookouts needed these, but it was debated they may not have helped as the icebergs was also kind of camouflaged. I'm assuming because it was a moonless night and the reflection of the ice with the water and the sky. I mean, you're talking about it's an iceberg. It's practically ice. It is ice, but the reflections.
Yeah.
So one fucked up thing about that is the key to the binocular locker was eventually sold at auction for a substantial amount, highlighting the historical significance of the seemingly small detail. That's disgusting.
That is disgusting.
I mean,
That's
I
wow.
kind of want it, but that's disgusting.
I mean, it's a historical artifact, I guess, of a very messed up thing that happened, you know. But yeah, I don't even know what to say about that.
Right.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Yeah. All right. And let's get into the iceberg warnings. There were so many iceberg warnings that went out. I think they said that it was close to 300 that the Titanic received. It says messages from other ships came in regarding iceberg warnings. The messages were given to the captain, but he wasn't too worried about it because he thought they were on the north side of the downward projection of the icebergs. Well, earlier that day, or the day before, you know what a sextant is?
No.
It's an old maritime instrument where you put it up to your eye and then you match the horizon. And then you're reading off numbers of what the horizon is, and you can see what the coordinates of where you're at. Kind of like a GPS. But they've been used for hundreds of years. And if you're off by 1 degree, or even a partial degree, you think of how big the ocean is. That could be, I think it's in a longitude. No, I think it's in latitude. One of the two. If you're off by even a partial of a degree, that could be a 13 to 30 mile difference on where you're at in the ocean. So if you're off 2 degrees, think of how big it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, they didn't know, but they were off by, I think, 1 degree. So the captain of the ship, Edward Smith, thought that he was north of what the primary iceberg field was, and the icebergs were heading south, which the captain actually canceled the lifeboat drills that day because of that. Not quite because of that, but it was partial reason. So the Titanic, no one had ever actually lowered the lifeboats down. The only time that they were ever lowered was, I think, in Belfast, Ireland. 2 of them were lowered, but they never even touched water. So there was a new mechanism that was installed on Titanic on how to bring down the lifeboats, and no one had practiced that. No one knew how to use them. 2 people knew how to use them, but they thought the Titanic was unsinkable, that they wouldn't have to use them. I don't remember how many lifeboats there were. I think it was 14, and that doesn't even account for even half of the passengers on board.
Yeah, and didn't they say in the movie that they could have put more lifeboats on, but then it would make the deck too cluttered?
Yeah, but the Titanic actually had more lifeboats than what was regulated. I think it had 4 extra lifeboats than what was regulated.
Wow.
I mean, they
more
thought it was
lifeboats
unsinkable.
should have been regulated. There's no way that they actually thought it was unsinkable. That was a gimmick to try and get people to get on the boat, you know? There's no way they didn't know that it...
But at the same time, they used different wording. It was practically insinkable. So everyone heard unsinkable.
Yeah.
So they never actually said that this ship couldn't sink. All right, so... Gonna go to communication. The biggest thing with the Titanic, outside of it being the largest man-made moving object, was also the communication system that they had on board. But at the same time, most of the ships by now had the same communication. It started to become standard. It was called the Marconi wireless telegraphy. I just want to say telegraph. It was made in 1897. But you know what a telegraph is? You know, like Morse code and all that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're combining the 2 into 1.
Okay.
It's not exactly a telephone. It's like a telephone. You call one person, or you can call, I don't know, conference call in another person.
Mm-hmm.
This one, though, it's everyone is talking at the same time. So not only can it communicate with other compartments on the ship, it's communicating with all the ships around. And it's so high tech at the time because at night it can go up to 2,000 miles. So think about all of the other ships within 2,000 miles, all of the ports, and anyone else who has this device. Everyone's talking at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of cool. That's helpful. So it was utilized radio waves and Morse code to transmit messages, enabling communication between the ships and ashore, as well as between different compartments in the ship. It was considered at that time the best in the world. The early wireless telegraph wasn't like a telephone, as I said. Everyone could hear. but there is yet an established way for emergencies. So if an emergency happened, like everyone's hearing, but there's no actual signal like calling 911. Like you have a direct line to calling 911. There was nothing like that.
Okay.
While advanced for its time, the system had limitations, including potential interference with other ships and the operators prioritizing passenger messages over warnings. So remember that. All right, you got all these like first class passengers. They're on the Titanic. I mean, you've got the millionaire's captain, Edward Smith, John Jacob Astor, who was the richest person on the ship. You've got the I can't remember his first name, but Guggenheim, like the Guggenheim Museum in New York.
Mm-hmm. I don't know the first name.
Yeah, I can't remember the first name. You've also got, the hell's his name? The head of, I think JP Morgan was on the ship, as well as the department store owner, or actually he owned half of the department store, or she, of Macy's. So just,
Isn't that the couple that owned Macy's? And wasn't that the couple depicted in the movie where you see them just laying in bed together and kind of accepting their fate?
yeah, it is. John Jacob Astor is depicted as, we go down like gentlemen, or I can't remember what the hell he says in the movie, but he ends up dressing up in his best, asking for a drink with his cigar.
Mm-hmm.
When he was found, he actually had $3,000 cash on him.
That was a lot of money back then.
I don't remember how much it translates to today. I didn't do that math. I want to say like 70,000.
I'm looking it up. $3,000 in 1912, right? 1912? $3,000 in 1912 is equivalent to about $99,422 today.
Well, I was close to 70,000. Jesus,
Yeah.
that's what he had in his pocket. All right, so you've got all these people so excited that they can send messages offshore, and they're using these Marconi wireless operators to do that. These guys are like celebrities on the ship. I mean, imagine the tips that you're going to get from them. And there's only two Marconi operators on the entire ship, and they were not employed by the White Star Line, which is the parent company of Titanic. They were actually employees of the Marconi wireless system. I don't know, just fun information. But remember that the operators were also prioritizing the passenger messages over different warnings. All right, so you got Jack Phillips. He is 25 years old. He's the senior operator, and we're going to be talking about him quite a bit. And then there's also Harold Bride. He's 22 years old, and he's the junior operator. They were the only two wireless operators on the entire ship. The men were employed by the Marconi wireless system, and they spent a lot of their time giving and sending messages to and from the first class passengers. So while they're trying to prioritize their time and do this, because it's so new at that time. I mean, hell, it came out in 1897. Titanic was 1912. For technology, that was still very, I mean, remember how long it took for cell phones came in like what, the 1980s, really? And didn't get big until about like 2005. All right. So it is now April 14th, 1912. The Titanic has been out for 4 days on their 6-day voyage, 7 days. I can't fully remember. Got so much different information in my head. It's hard for me to get out because I'm trying to stick to specific topics. Well, the Californian was the closest ship to the Titanic at that time, and they only had one wireless operator. Cyril? S-Y-R-L-I-A? No, S-Y-R-I-L.
I want to say it's Cyril. Yeah. I could be wrong, but
we're going to refer to him as Evans because that's his last name. He signaled to another ship, the Antillean, that 3 large icebergs were 5 miles to the south. The Titanic's wireless operator, Bride, also received the warnings and delivered to the ship's captain. So with the iceberg warnings, there are different levels of warnings that you have to give. Some are literally just like ice, where, hey, there's ice in the area. Others are called growlers, which like the size of, I don't know, a car. And then there's icebergs, like beware. So some warnings are less than others. So with the 300 warnings that they were getting in, went anywhere from a stone to the Empire State Building. So with all of those coming in, it was difficult for them to decide which messages they had to give, but the messages that were very important, they actually had like MSG on the warning, which meant you have to give it to the captain within 2 hours. Like all those protocols were followed.
Okay, because I was going to say that they probably got used to all of those messages being kind of nothing. So maybe something got overlooked.
Yeah, well, especially for being in April where they weren't normally icebergs in that area because the waters were too warm. The flow, the Gulf Stream was different, but they were also the Titanic. They weren't going to sink.
Or so they thought.
So they thought. Well, at 10:20 p.m., the Californian encountered a large ice field. The captain ordered full stop and to rest for the night and wait it out. And they're roughly about 13 miles away. Anywhere from 13 to 20. It's still today hard to actually know.
So they're in the middle of an ice field. They stopped in the middle of an ice field. Wouldn't you think? I would think that if you stopped in the middle of an ice field, there could be a chance of the whole thing just kind of icing over and trapping the ship.
I don't think the water wasn't that cold, though. Like, so the entire ocean isn't going to freeze around it. They stopped because they could not distinguish the difference between the water and the sky. And they knew that it was safer to hang out where they're at rather than hitting an iceberg. At least wait for the sun to come up. They'll have better visibility.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, at 11 p.m., the Marconi operator from the Californian sent a message to the Titanic. We are stopped and surrounded by ice. But the captain of the Titanic, Edward Smith, and the first officer, William Murdoch, did not heed these warnings and steamed ahead at near full speed. So if everyone remembers from the movie, you've got Bruce Ismay saying full speed. Let's reach New York early. Let's make the morning papers. He was so worried about trying to show off the Titanic more than what it actually needed to be. And again, everyone thought that for the Titanic that they weren't really in the iceberg field. They thought that they were north of it because of the section ratings. Several iceberg warnings were received. The Titanic were not relayed to the captain, contributing to the disaster. A critical warning from the Masabi, which is another ship, was ignored by the Titanic's Marconi operator, Phillips, who prioritized passenger messages. So while the Californian is trying to send messages to the Titanic, Phillips actually snapped back saying, "Keep out. Shut up, shut up. I am busy. I am working Cape Race." All he cared about were the messages to the passengers. Because
what were the messages?
Who knows? Just anything and everything.
Like, meet me here for tea and stupid shit like that?
I mean, it's possible. I am sure John Jacob Astor had quite a bit of it, or Guggenheim. But you got to remember that all these messages that are coming in, do you remember ever being in a chat room?
I don't think I was ever in a chat room.
Yeah. So imagine being on a phone call and there's 30 people on that phone call and you're trying to listen to like two different people. Yeah. That's kind of what it was for them. All right. So the Marconi operator on the Californian listened for a little bit. Like, he didn't take offense to it. He understood. But around midnight, he decided like he's done. That was normal though. He's going to shut off his wireless equipment and go to sleep. And he actually told the Titanic, "Okay, well, I'm done for the night. Shut off all communication." Apparently that was normal. So then at 11:40, so minding you, all of that happened at 11 o'clock. 40 minutes later, Frederick Fleet, who was on the lookout tower in the Titanic, yells, "Iceberg right ahead," and rang the bell. 30 seconds later, she hit the iceberg. And for all you remembering watching the movie, they're yelling full stop, put it in reverse, hoping to miss everything. And that all happened in 30 seconds. After the Titanic struck the iceberg, the wireless operator sent out distress signals, including the CQD and SOS signals. And there's actually a quote, "Use SOS. It's the new call, and it may be your last chance to send it," which were crucial alerting systems for the emergency. So CQD is a historical maritime distress call. It means come quick disaster. Never heard of that.
I've heard of CQD. I didn't know what it stood for.
I've never heard of it. SOS stands for Save Our Souls or Save Our Ship, which is most commonly used today.
I didn't know what that stood for either. Am I stupid for not knowing that?
No, I knew Save Our Souls, but I didn't know Save Our Ship. But it completely makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I just never knew what it meant.
Well, Phillips and Bride continued to send distress signals until the power failed. Phillips did not survive, but Bride managed to escape on one of the collapsible lifeboats. And then when the Carpathia picked them up, he was able to assist with more communication after they were all saved. So he went straight back to work from one ship to the next. All right, so there was a lot there. What questions do you have before we go on to the next? I know I've missed things.
Oh, I don't even know what you have missed. I don't think I have any questions.
So now the Titanic has hit the iceberg. Let's talk about the ships that were in the area. These are some things that a lot of people don't know. The first one may not be accurate, it may be, but the ship is called the Samson. Apparently, it was anywhere from 7 to 10 miles away from the Titanic, but because the crew had been hunting seals illegally, they didn't want to be caught and they turned away from the Titanic. Okay, if that's true, and you're the captain of the ship and the fucking Titanic just went down, how shitty are you and how do you feel afterwards? So official records from what is called Lloyd's and Iceland show that the Samson docked in, I'm not even going to pronounce this name, it docked somewhere else on April 6th and April 20th. So essentially, it was making it impossible to have been anywhere near the Titanic during the sinking. There was another claim that the Samson had no radio and therefore could not have received the Titanic's stress signals. But then another person says one of the Samson's officers, Hendrick, claimed to have seen rockets from the Titanic, but didn't report it due to the illegal sealing that they were currently doing. And he also stated that the waters were so calm that night, they couldn't tell the difference between the water and the sky. So you've got one account where no one is anywhere near it, that it's impossible for that ship to have been anywhere in the vicinity of the Titanic. But then you have first-person accounts that say something else. So we don't really know if that ship was in the area. But that was 7 to 10 miles away.
Okay.
The Carpathia was 58 miles away, which was 4 hours. When they heard the distress cries over the radio, the ship turned around and went full steam ahead through the ice fields. Like, we're not going to turn away the Titanic.
Yeah.
This ship was a ship that saved 705 survivors on the Titanic. It actually only was able to save the passengers because the crews saw a flare that was fired from one of the lifeboats. The SOS signal sent out from the Titanic was 13 miles away from where they actually found the lifeboats. You remember me talking about the sextant reading?
Yeah.
No one knew that the sextant reading was off, but like all of this is starting to build up a little bit. Well, we've got the next ship. Remember me talking about the Californian who sent out those distress calls for the Titanic about icebergs? They were roughly 14 miles away. But because the conditions weren't favorable and it was dark, the crew convinced themselves that nothing had happened.
They just ignored it?
No, they didn't even really actually ignore it. They turned off their communication. They turned off their communication 40 minutes before Titanic hit the iceberg. Or 20 minutes. Their last communication was at 11 o'clock. Titanic hit the iceberg at 11:40. They listened for a little bit. And then they turned it off. So, I mean, hell, it could have only been 10 minutes.
Okay, so what did they convince themselves didn't happen?
Titanic didn't sink. That nothing had happened. But in hindsight, the captain of the ship spent the rest of his life trying to clear his name. Well, there was a lot of court hearings that happened afterwards. So when the Carpathia, however you pronounce it, they tugged over 4 hours and rescued the survivors of the Titanic. Titanic had already been sank for about an hour and a half, 2 hours at that point. California eventually ended up, after they kind of realized what happened, somehow ended up passing the Carpathia. Well, there was a lot of court hearings that happened afterwards, and here are some of the things that happened. Well, the Californian was heading from England to Boston, Massachusetts, and it left England on April 12th. It wasn't carrying any passengers. It was probably carrying like 10 crewmen on the ship total. The captain of the ship was Lord. I think Evans Lord, and he asked the Marconi operator if he knew of any ships in the area, and it responded, only the Titanic. Lord asked to inform that the California was stopped and surrounded by ice. Lord ordered Evans to warn all the other ships in the area, which he had. So, like, they knew the Titanic was in the ice field, and they turned off all their communication devices. Well, the Carpathia arrived at 4 a.m., and the captain of the Californian awoke at 4:30 and found out that the Titanic had sunk. The Californian had actually ended up passing the Carpathia on its journey. When reporters asked Lord about his exact position the night of the disaster, he refused to respond, calling such information state secrets.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. On May 2nd, the British Wreck Commissioner inquiry into the sinking of the Titanic began. Again, Lord gave conflicting, inconsistent, and evasive testimony. The crew of the California also gave conflicting testimony as well. Most notably, Lord said he was not told that there was any nearby ships, contradicting James Gibson, who testified he had reported it to Lord, and he acknowledged that the Titanic was in the area. All right, so a lot of what I just said was fairly scrambled. So the captain of the Californian, Lord, he had asked the Marconi operator if there were any ships in the area, and he said the Titanic. It's like, okay, well, you sent messages out to them. They are aware. We're going to hunker down for the night and see what happens. Like, we did what we could. It was also regulation and common for all the Marconi operators to kind of sign off around midnight every night. So that was normal. But he had conflicting testimonies that no one ever told the captain of the Californian that any ships were in the area, while his crewmen said that, yeah, like we saw the flares of the Titanic. But they also didn't know if they saw the flares from the Titanic or if they saw stars. But they did realize that they could see something, and then next thing you know, they couldn't see anything. Like, they're 13 miles away, but when you're out there all alone, I think there are some times where the horizon with the water could be 50 miles away. You can still see. So he ended up spending the rest of his life trying to clear his name. Like, I'm one of the captains who ended up turning away the Titanic, but there wasn't anything that I could do about it, and I didn't know about it.
He still felt really guilty about it.
Yeah. All right. All of this is going to come together very shortly, but we're going to talk about one more person. You remember who Bruce Ismay is? The guy with the mustache in the movie who kept ordering full speed?
Yes.
He was actually the president of the White Star Line, but he was a passenger at that time on the Titanic for the maiden voyage. He was the guy who ordered full speed to get ahead and try to, like, surprise the morning papers. He wanted to do this to beat their sister ship, the Olympic, on their arrival time the year prior for the exact same voyage. Since it wasn't as fast as others, he wanted to beat the arrival time. I get it. You're on the largest man-made moving object, but it's not as fast as other ships, so let's compensate somehow. Let's ignore everything and just keep going. Well, so he was also kind of a dick. You remember the movie, Edwards, Captain Smith, who he went in and went down with the ship, as the captains are supposed to? Same with the builder. It was normal at that time. It's still normal. It's still expected that the captain, anyone who's high on the totem pole for the ship, goes down with the ship. Bruce Ismay did not. He ended up boarding. He got on one of the very last lifeboat. I think it was Collapsible Lifeboat C. I think it was the 13th lifeboat. So his reasoning behind it is he thought that he was one of the last people on to get on the lifeboat. All the women and children had already gotten on, and there wasn't really anyone fighting for lifeboats, and he saw an empty space and hopped on.
I call bullshit on that, because if the movie is historically accurate about that, there were people scrambling everywhere, and there were all kinds of people that were left without lifeboats.
Well, the movie is as historically accurate as it can be pieced together through different accounts.
I think he just got scared and hopped on a lifeboat.
No, I think he did too. When the Carpathia arrived and he got on, he ended up sending a message to the White Star Line's office in New York to make sure that there was a ship ready for him to head back to England with his crew right away. There are some accounts that say that he knew that there was going to be an American inquiry, which there was. I think it was the senator of Michigan demanded an inquiry 2 days later for a Senate hearing to be taken place. Because how many American lives do you have on that boat as well? So of course America is going to get on it. Ismay's first response was, well, since we flew the British flag, I thought that the British were going to have an inquiry first. I didn't think that America, so we're trying to get back there in time. But the Navy actually ended up interfering the messages and giving him a subpoena by the time that he made it to land in America. So like the Navy figured it out what he's trying to do. It's like, no, I'm keeping your ass here.
Wow.
He ended up resigning as president, but he did stay on as chairman on the White Star Line, essentially to make sure that all the insurance payments were paid out to the victims of the family.
Good.
Yeah. He was deemed a coward. He spent the rest of his life in shame about it. So the Titanic went down in 1912. He passed away in 1937, and it was like almost also a family secret, like not a secret, but taboo. No one in the family were to talk about it. Don't ever mention Titanic again.
I can see that. I can understand that.
Yeah. He was never convicted. No one was. It was pretty much deemed a complete accident, even by American and British government.
I cannot imagine being the captain of a ship who is expected to stay on the ship while it's sinking. I mean, honestly, I'd probably do the same thing because I'd be scared.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't really, you can't really blame him and call him a dick. He got scared. I mean, yeah, it's customary for him to stay on the ship, but you're just willingly going to die. Some people just can't do that.
I don't know. I'm definitely struggling with that.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, even the architect of the ship went down. One thing that's mysterious about this is the log was never found, like the travel log, the ship log. And at that time, it was customary for if anything were to happen, the log was to be placed in a waterproof bag, and it was to take off the ship on a lifeboat with the highest ranking officer. That never happened, and it was never found. So did the captain know about any of the misreadings, the sexton readings?
I can't imagine that anybody really knew about anything. They weren't prepared. They weren't expecting the ship to go down since it was unsinkable. They didn't have enough lifeboats. They didn't even test the lifeboats. And something that minute, a tiny detail like that, they probably just didn't do it.
So it struck the iceberg at roughly 11:40 p.m. and it went down at 2:20 a.m. So 2 hours and 40 minutes. The first lifeboat wasn't even filled until an hour after it went down. So you've got an hour and 40 minutes to figure out how to fill these lifeboats and what to do. Mm-hmm. People refused to even put on life vests because the ship is unsinkable.
Yeah, they were in disbelief. They weren't taking it seriously. But a little detail like the ship log, that's probably the last thing anybody was thinking about.
Oh, I mean, probably not, really. I think they actually traveled like an extra 10 miles before they fully stopped. So now you're rushing even more water in because they fully believed that the ship will not sink.
Yeah, I would think that maybe they were trying to just make it somewhere before they took on too much water.
Yeah, probably.
Like, let's hurry up and get over here, wherever they were.
I have no idea. I don't understand what they were thinking. Well, the Titanic, after all the inquiries and all the hearings, like some of the hearings went on, I think one ended up happening in like 1967, and then another in like another happened in 1992. Like it's still to this day never ending. So the Titanic disaster led to the U.S. Radio Act of 1912, which was mandated 24-hour manning of wireless equipment and regulated wireless communication to improve maritime safety. So 24 hours, you can't turn off your radio equipment. Like you guys are out there in the middle of the goddamn ocean. All the ships around you is all you have. Work together as a team. Then the International Ice Control was formed from that as well, which is essentially like everyone is communicating where icebergs are. They're on watch at all times. Since that was formed and created, no ship heeding its warning has struck an iceberg since the Titanic.
Good.
So, I mean, out of like things that came about, like the Carpathia saved 705 people's lives. How many more lives have it saved since 1912 with all the safety measures that have been in place, as well as the lifeboat regulations where more are on every single ship to the point that it can now save every single person accounted for on the ship.
Mm-hmm.
In 1985, when the Titanic was found, it was found 13 miles away than the position that it was calling out for in the SOS in 1912, which proves that the sextant reading was inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
In 1992, there was yet another inquiry on the Titanic, and it exonerated the captain of the Californian, stating it wouldn't have changed the fact that the Californian wouldn't have arrived in time because the Californian was, if they had their radios on, they thought that the Titanic was 13 miles away from what it originally was, so it could have actually been 30 miles away from where the Californian was. They could have gone in circles. It would not have made a difference. So while the captain of the Californian, Lord, was spending the rest of his life trying to redeem himself, in 1992, he was finally exonerated.
Yeah, there is truly nothing that he could have done.
No. Oh, you want to hear about a couple of the conspiracies?
Yes. Where's my tinfoil hat?
Let's first get to some of the cargo.
Okay.
While the Titanic was primarily remembered as a passenger liner, it was also carrying a valuable cargo on its maiden voyage. Some of the items in the ship held, including I don't know what this is, a very old automobile, a Renault, Renault. And if you remember in the beginning of the movie, when they're loading up the Titanic, you can see a car being...
Yeah. Didn't it
Which
kind of
might-
look like a Model T?
Maybe. I don't know the difference. Which could have actually been the same car that Rose lost her virginity in.
Could have been. Maybe that's why they showed it.
Maybe. Cases of fine wines and even a consignment of dragon blood resin.
What the hell is that?
I don't know. I should have looked it up. I wish I did. The exact contents of the cargo hold was insignificant, and fate remained obstructed in the annals of maritime history. There was paintings. There was all sorts of shit. There was people's life savings. They were traveling from country to country for an entirely new life. Everything and nothing was with them at the same time. All right, so here's your conspiracies. Fire. In the weeks leading up to the Titanic's maiden voyage, a coal fire raged in one of the ship's coal bunkers. The fire, which burned for days, it's believed to have weakened the ship's hull in the exact location where it later struck the iceberg. While the fire was known to some of the crew members, it remained unreported to most passengers, sparking theories of conspiracy to downplay the incident's significance. Whether the coal fire played a significant role in the ship's eventual demise remains a subject of debate among Titanic historians.
That kind of makes me think, you know how in the movie when Jack and Rose are running away from that guy and they run through that room? What's it called?
In the boiler, yeah.
Yeah. I wonder if they put that scene in just to kind of hint towards that conspiracy theory.
It's possible, but I think that they're also just running through a boiler that was already burning so much coal. And they were just trying to show that.
There might have been nothing to it, but just kind of makes you think.
That's definitely a conspiracy. The ship was made out of steel. The rivets were made out of steel. And they actually think with the rivets and the ship being made out of the same material, it could have helped weakened it a little bit. I don't know what that means. Apparently, there's something going on with Egypt on the ship as well.
Egypt?
Among the Titanic's passengers was a parcel containing an ancient Egyptian mummy known as the Unlucky Mummy. Legend has it that the mummy carried a curse, and its presence on the board of the ill-fated ship spelled a doom of those who encountered it. Although this story is more rooted in supernatural than in fact, it adds an eerie, mysterious dimension to this trip's tragic history.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before. That's interesting.
Let's add on to it a little bit. There's also a legend that emerged linking the Titanic sinking to a mummy's curse, which sounds the exact same, a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, there was an inner coffin lid from the 22nd dynasty, which was rumored to bring bad luck. The object never left the British Museum, and was not on the Titanic. So, that's the fact.
Okay.
But a dozen passengers did travel to Egypt and did bring artifacts back, such as John Jacob Astor and Margaret Tobin Brown. Brown's insurance claim included a valued amount of $500,000 and 3 crates of ancient models for the Denver Museum. Yeah, that's a lot of money in 1912.
Yeah. Was that the unsinkable Molly Brown?
No, a different one. And the last one, but I guess we can go into a couple of after that. Not really. The Olympic. They were trying to claim it as an insurance claim. The Olympic is one of the sister ships to the Titanic. It bore a striking resemblance to her sister ship, led along a relatively uneventful career as a passenger liner. However, its story is marred by allegations of a possible switch between the Olympic and the Titanic as part of an insurance fraud. While these claims are disputed by historians, they add a large layer of intrigue to the Titanic's history. They were trying to claim that the Olympic had its own issues, and they were trying to switch it where all the passengers were actually boarding the Olympic instead of the Titanic and to sink it to get the insurance claim. So you're intentionally going to kill how many people? 1,500?
For an insurance claim? I'm not quite understanding that whole thing.
No one really does. And the Olympic was, it was built in 1911. It eventually was retired and scrapped in 1935. If it wasn't for the Titanic, then it would have been the largest ship between 1911 and 1913. There really isn't a whole lot to say about it other than like almost every picture that you see of the interior of the Titanic was actually a picture of the Olympic. They were completely identical.
Mm-hmm.
So like this grand staircase, there are no pictures of the grand staircase of the Titanic. What you see is the Olympic. Of course, unless you see the pictures of it underwater. Yeah. It didn't have any time to be photographed. So they're trying to make it an insurance claim where they were also trying to beat out the competitions. Like they're trying to kill JP Morgan. They were trying to kill the owner of Macy's department store while trying to get the insurance claim back for a ship that already had issues, quote unquote issues, to make up for the money that they spent building the Titanic.
Okay. That sounds like a pretty dirty scheme.
And there was one more sister ship called the Britannic, which was HMHS Britannic, which stands for His or Her Majesty's Hospital Ship.
Oh, fancy.
It looked almost identical to the Titanic as well. It was only around for 11 months, and it was struck by a U-boat.
Alrighty. There was a conspiracy about that?
No, it was I'm just letting you know what the sister ships were.
Struck by a U-boat. By
a German U-boat.
And,
yeah.
But U-boats are submarines, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't the submarine kind of a little bit too... What do I want to say? Wasn't it supposed to be deeper in the water than that? Because you would think that U-boats would be able to just go right under the ships and not hit them, you know?
I have no idea.
I don't know. When I think
don't
of
understand the difference.
I think of it, well, U-boat is a submarine. It goes underwater. So you would think that there would have had to be a standard of how deep they needed to be in certain parts to avoid that kind of shit from happening.
Probably.
But back then, who the hell knows?
Yeah, who the hell knows?
I don't know how that stuff works. I'm just trying to use my noodle.
Is that hard for you?
Tonight, yes, it really, really is.
A couple of facts on the Titanic. There were 1,317 passengers, 108 crew members. Anywhere between 1,503 and 1,517 people were lost. 106 people were saved. There were 20 lifeboats. And it's very hard to tell. There are so many different stories and accounts. Anywhere from 4 to 48 people were actually saved from the water.
Okay.
It's one of the things that will go down in history as one of the most tragic things in the century.
Yeah.
There have been other ships that lost more lives, but with Titanic being what it was on its maiden voyage and everything to do with it.
Mm-hmm. That's why people still talk about it today. That's why they are Titanic fanatics. Because it was a really big deal. So it's kind of cool that we're doing this because we're fanatics in different things. So we have a wide variety of things to talk about.
And I can go on for so long about the Titanic, but at the end of the day, everything that was stacked up against it, it has every court hearing, everyone has been exonerated. It is completely consumed as a complete accident. Everything was against it.
Yeah, just a very tragic accident. I mean, there were people who were careless, and there were people that were thinking more about fame and money than lives. And the idea that the Titanic couldn't sink was a very arrogant idea. But I mean, at the end of the day, it was just an accident.
Yeah, and I think in about 30 to 50 years, the Titanic's actually going to be gone. And it's going to be decayed that much on the ocean floor that...
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I personally do not think that they need to be building a second Titanic. Did that ever happen? Because I haven't heard anything about it.
My God,
weren't they building it?
That has been all over Facebook for like the last 6 years, 7 years, who knows? I have no idea. But it's supposed to be an exact replica, and it's supposed to take the exact same voyage. Do not tempt fate.
Yeah, what are you doing? Stay off that boat. History repeats itself.
And I guess we can throw in a couple of things on the Titan. Rest in peace for those victims, for the submersible that imploded. There are so many dark things that I can say right now, but that's a tragedy as well. And I don't think I want to.
Yeah, that was awful. And there's a lot of stuff I can say too. There's a lot of stuff that I can tell you that I heard about it. There's bad all around. Just that's a nightmare.
All right, well, everyone, that feels like the end. If you haven't watched Titanic, James Cameron did an amazing job with it. He actually cut his pay and decided that he isn't going to get paid for it and put it back into the movie. And then at the box office just blew up. And yeah, of course he got paid for it. But
wow.
Yeah, it's very historically accurate.
Except for Jack and Rose, who did not exist.
And Jack Dawson did exist, but not in that person. Apparently.
Oh, I didn't know that part.
I don't know. All right, well, that was somewhat of a dark episode.
I will say one thing, though. I went to see the Titanic in the theaters when it first came out, and I was very, very pregnant for my first child. And I did not cry at the end of Titanic because I was a pregnant bitch, and I just did not find it sad.
Titanic is actually one of the only movies that I do not cry in, because I also watch it for the historical value.
Yeah, I didn't watch it for that. I guess back then with my mentality, I should have cried, but I did not because I was very pregnant and very hormonal and maybe a little mean-spirited or something. I did not find it sad. I did not cry. I remember people telling me that I was heartless for that. Like, how could you not cry at the end of that?
Yeah, you were also a bitch then.
I've always been a bitch.
All right, well, go watch Titanic. Go watch all the documentaries. There's actually a new documentary that covers some of what I've said. It's on History Channel, but you can also find it on YouTube. It came out, I want to say, March of 2025. It's the newest documentary with the newest information, and it's very good. But I think that is all that I know. Unless you want me to go on for 3 more hours.
I'm tired. Let's just say goodbye.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.